Australia. This is the home of what is for me one of the most extraordinary of all families of birds. They're extraordinary because they're artists, sculptors and painters. And the males use their creations and the treasures that they collect in order to impress females in a way that is paralleled by no other kind of animal on Earth, except, of course, us. These are the treasures, each one specially selected and all arranged with meticulous care. And behind them, an extraordinary two-walled construction. This is not a nest. It's an art gallery, or perhaps a treasury. And these are the jewels that it's been built to show off. Bones, snail shells, pebbles. And they have one thing in common. They're all white, because the artist that built this has a passion for the white. And if I retreat and have a little patience, he may well appear. This is him, the western bowerbird. And this is his bower. It dominates his life. If it's sufficiently impressive, then female after female, after inspecting it, will mate with him. Each will then go away and rear her family entirely by herself, while he stays here, doing what he can to improve his bower's appearance, rearranging and adding to the treasures it contains, and hoping for yet another mating. This is a female who's touring in the neighbourhood, seeing what's around. How does this bower compare with others that she's seen? He watches her closely to see what her reactions are. Maybe he can add a little spice with a dance. All other male birds, when displaying, have only their bodies to show off to females. A lyrebird uses his tail feathers. A bird of paradise flaunts special plumes. Coloured bald patches can be very effective, and inflating a throat pouch works well. So can wattles, particularly if they are as splendid as the tragopans. The male cock of the rock wears a cocked hat. The King of Saxony bird of paradise bounces up and down to show off his amazing head plumes. Some male pheasants sprout iridescent feathers of breathtaking beauty. All these are bodily decorations with which to impress females. We ourselves find some of these plumes so beautiful that we hunt the birds which grow them and then use their feathers ourselves for exactly the same purpose. Men in New Guinea who live alongside birds of paradise not only use their plumes to impress women, but bounce up and down similarly to display them. Indeed, all kinds of males in all parts of the world have always tried to rival the peacock. In 16th century England, few were finer or vainer than Henry VIII.
You think I look like a bridegroom? Hey?
Magnificent, Your Majesty.
I want that girl more than anything in my whole life.
And needless to say, he got her again and again. But most birds, unlike kings, have to grow their decorations. Supposing, instead of showing off your body and the feathers you've grown, you were able to impress females with the beauty of inanimate objects that you collect and the way you display them. Well, then you wouldn't be encumbered with all those feather decorations that you had to carry around all the time. And what is more, the female, when she comes to inspect your treasury, would be impressed whether you were there or not. And that's just what this bird does. The tooth-billed bowerbird. The objects he uses for display, leaves, could hardly be more unremarkable, and his way of displaying them, in what was perhaps the first kind of bower developed by the family, is simple in the extreme. It's no accident that all these leaves are pale side uppermost. The bird clearly prefers them that way, and I can easily prove that by turning one of them the other way up. That's better. And while he's at it, there are also some bits of twigs and leaves that some little lout has left around the place. That must be put right too. But no matter how attentive and conscientious he is, he has to go off to feed sometime, and that means leaving his treasures unattended. And no sooner has he left than another male appears. But this one is behaving rather differently. He seems nervous and apprehensive. He's a neighbour. These leaves have come from a tree nearly a mile away. Why fly all that distance to get more when these are nearby? To prevent that kind of thievery, each male spends as much time as possible beside his court. And when he's not working on it, he tries to attract the attention of females by singing. He listens to his neighbours and tries to outdo them by mimicking the songs of other species in the neighbourhood. A female has arrived. Immediately, the male comes down to his display ground and hides. He's only allowing her little glimpses, as though he were trying to make her curious as to where this strange clicking song of his is coming from. She seems interested. Now's the time to increase her curiosity, to go up a gear with a little fancy footwork and a gargle. It's a somewhat alarming way of demonstrating his charms, but it must presumably be the sort of thing that turns on a female. No, not good enough, or at any rate, not yet. North of Australia, across a narrow arm of sea and almost on the equator, lies the huge 1,000-mile-long island of New Guinea. Its thick, rain-drenched forests were once continuous with those in tropical Australia. So it's hardly surprising that the bowerbird family has representatives up here too. It's not easy country to travel in. It rains almost every day, so everything in the forest is permanently wet. And over great areas there are no roads, only thin tracks. So the only way to get around is on your own 2 feet. But it's a journey worth making, for here there are species that build some of the most extraordinary bowers, including one that not only uses the toothbill's technique of decorating the ground, but drapes the branches above as well. In this forest where every tree is hung with moss, you might walk straight past this bower, unless, that is, you noticed that there were blue berries balanced on this branch. And then behind you, dried orchid stems hung round this sapling like tinsel on a Christmas tree. And they go 10 12 feet up and extend 20 feet beyond me. And then, as you walk into the heart of this bower, really conclusive evidence of what it is. Here, lots and lots of wing cases of beetles, and most extraordinary and conclusive of all, 3 of the amazing head plumes of the King of Saxony bird of paradise. They could never have fallen into this position naturally. They must have been deliberately placed there by the owner of this gigantic, somewhat untidy bower. And this is the proprietor, Archbold's bowerbird, until very recently the least known member of the whole family, and that yellow curly crest shows that this is a male. A beetle's wing cover is clearly out of position. This is the female. She doesn't have that yellow crest. Her arrival is the cue for him to display. He seems to be playing hide-and-seek, like the male toothbill. It's a way of drawing her attention to the wonders that he's laid out on the ground. And when the female comes down to inspect them, he chases her in a ritualized way back and forth across the floor of the bower. But whether he's successful or not, who knows? No ornithologist has ever seen the mating of Archbold's bowerbird. It takes a practiced eye to immediately recognize that bower, but there's another kind in these forests that you can't possibly miss. It's easy to imagine how baffled early European travellers must have been when they found something like this in the depths of the forest. It's based around the stem of a tree fern. These aren't tree fern roots, they're separate twigs, each individually placed. On the end of many of them, there are pendants made of caterpillar droppings. This is a rim round the corridor made of impacted moss, and on the top of it, little black objects. They're actually fungus, but rare fungus. It's very hard to find these if you look in the forest here. Here's the owner, McGregor's bowerbird. Fungus, clearly, in any well-appointed, properly tended bower, should never be found in the runway round the base of the maypole. Keeping the bower smart requires such continuous attention that the male has little time for other things. So when he goes to forage, he brings back as much food as he can carry and stores it nearby. That way he doesn't have to leave the bower when he wants a snack. His reproductive success will depend on his having, in the eyes of the females, the most impressively ornamented bower around. And one can never have too many caterpillar droppings hanging on one's maypole. But suspending them is not easy. What next? Another twig. That could go on the very top of the maypole. We know that the females tour all the bowers in the neighbourhood, assessing them and presumably making a choice between them. And there must be 15 or 20 within a mile of where I'm sitting now. So on what basis do they choose? Well, they aren't judging as to whether the bird is going to be a good father in the sense of helping at the nest, because these male bowerbirds have no part in either building a nest or feeding the young. So the females presumably are judging on the way that this bower has been built, how it's been decorated, and how he dances within it. And that means that the females must have some kind of aesthetic sense, artistic sense. And the interesting thing is that in recent years, European sculptors have also thought that there is great aesthetic power in constructions like this. Andy Goldsworthy is one of the most highly regarded artists who create what has become known as land or environmental art.
My art is unmistakably recognizable as the touch of a person. I am not a bird, and I do not mimic the things that I see that birds and animals make. However, there are parallels to be made.
It seems undeniable that both bowerbirds and artists find something attractive, rewarding, satisfying in constructions made of natural materials which carry, in Andy Goldsworthy's words, the touch of a person. Just as each human person has his or her individuality, so does every male bowerbird.
The sculptures are a response to place, light, atmosphere, the day, time, but it starts with the material. That's the beginning, and if there are a lot of branches that have curves in them, then that takes me in a certain direction. It allows me to work the material in particular ways that I cannot with a straight branch.
So if this is a work of art, as it certainly is in the opinion of many critics, why is this not? This artist, if that is what he is, goes in for multimedia. He backs up his sculpture with a song. There's the female. He uses the standard family technique of trying to arouse her curiosity by hiding. She flies off to one side, and he dodges to the other to keep out of sight behind his pole. But she's going to look elsewhere. He didn't perform his full display. That is a very rare sight indeed, for he only does it when a female comes right down into the runway, and females are extremely choosy. But this one has done so. The final revelation, the full display of the crest that until now he's kept hidden, though still he will only give her glimpses of it. Less than 1 in 10 male bowerbirds in the area manage to persuade a female to reach this stage and then copulate with them in the forest nearby. But those few winning males will mate with many females. All bower builders try to be polygamists. 5 of the 18 species of bowerbirds build their bowers on the maypole plan, and each species does so in its own particular way. In the Australian rainforest, there's another. This is a rather more complex bower. It's similar in many ways to the maypole, but instead of having one maypole, it's got 2. Here's one around this sapling, and here, not quite so big, is another. Every single twig has been brought in, and on this kind of bower you nearly always find that they've been glued together with a kind of fungus. And between the 2 maypoles there is a horizontal branch, and it's there that the jewels are placed by the bird. There are lots of these translucent seed pods, but mostly it's this yellow lichen. And if I put this on there, I don't think he'll like it. That might bring him in, and I will go and wait over there to see if we're in luck. The forest is full of sound. That's him. That's his scolding call. You have to keep as still as possible if you sit out in the open like this. The trouble with this forest is it's full of mosquitoes, and I daren't flap my hands too much. That's the whipbird. It's a very typical sound of this Queenston rainforest. That's the whipbird again. He's coming down to the bower. There's the bowerbird. That's one of his approach posts. Here he comes. No, he certainly doesn't like that bit of lichen that I put it. Again. This time he's bought a jasmine flower, one of his favourite decorations. There must be a female nearby. He's playing peekaboo, like the McGregors, only this time he's not using a sapling, but a very substantial tree trunk. That's her. Come down to the bower. That's him again. There he comes. But he's behaving very strangely. What's he doing? He's not rearranging his decorations, he's throwing them away. This must be a stranger, a neighbour, a rival, intent on damaging this bower in order to make his nearby seem better. Just as some building sites in a city are more valuable than others, so it is with the sites of bowers in a forest. The longer a bower has been established, the more valuable its site becomes. And that's for two reasons. First of all the females in the neighbourhood will know where it is and where to come to look for a mate. Secondly, the owner of the bower will have been depositing his droppings in the neighbourhood. They necessarily contain the seeds of the fruits on which he feeds. So if the site has been occupied for a long time, there will be an unusual concentration of food plants there. This particular site has been occupied for at least 22 years. 2 years ago, disaster struck. A tree fell and smashed the bower. But did the male abandon his property? No, he did not. It was far too valuable. He simply moved a few yards and built another construction, and one that, if anything, is even more spectacular than the earlier one. And he's back within seconds to keep it so. The mountains of New Guinea, away to the north, are much higher and much wetter than those of northern Queensland, and it's on their flanks and in the most leech-ridden part of these forests that you have to go if you want to see the almost unbelievable complexity to which a maypole bower can be brought. And this is the work of the master builder among bowerbirds. I'm in the Vogelkop on the far western tip of New Guinea, and this is the bower of the Vogelkop bowerbird. And what an astonishment it is. Surely one of the wonders of the natural world. The bower has been completely roofed over, thatched with these stems of orchids. It's been built around the base of a sapling It has a stout pillar right in the middle, and it's got two smaller pillars on the side to support it. The whole of the treasury is 5 or 6 yards across, and what treasures it contains, or what variety of treasures it contains. On the far side, there are the black stems of tree ferns. Here is the lawn, neatly planted with moss, and on it, the shiny wing covers of beetles. There are orange fruit. There are these glowing orange dead leaves. These are the acorns of the oak trees, the tropical oaks which are common around here. Behind me there are black fruits. This individual nearby, however, has completely different tastes. His bower is just as large and as splendidly thatched, but he has taken advantage of a bush coming into bloom and has decided to try and impress the touring females with floral decorations. It's not without significance that the builders of these, the most elaborate of bowers, are the plainest members of the family, with no crest of any kind. Only a few hundred yards away from that, a third bower, and yet another quite different display. This bird is experimenting with brown fungus and brown leaves. Another short walk and yet another bower, and another quite different collection. Blackberries, orange fruit, and orange blossom from a mountain rhododendron. And this bower is again different. So each female in this species must be deciding which composition she likes best. She must be selecting a male for his skill as an artist. Another branch of the family builds bowers along totally different lines. To see the simplest of these, you have to go back to Australia. You might think that this is just a rather untidy nest that some reckless bird has put on the ground. But in fact, it's not a nest at all. It's another bower. It has two sides to it. It's an avenue bower. And at that end of it, there's a cleared patch and just one or two treasures, nothing spectacular, just a few little green leaves. That, you may say, is not much of a temptation to display to a female. But you wait till you see the bird that made it. The regent bowerbird has the most spectacular plumage of the entire family, while his female, like all in the family, is very plain. It seems that there's a rule among bowerbirds. The more elaborate your bower, the less vivid your plumage. And conversely, as in this case, the simpler the bower, the more colourful the male. And since the male regent has such brilliant plumage, he understandably attracts the females initially by perching in the topmost sunlit branches where he can be seen to the best. Having got her attention, he must now lead her down. His bower may not be much, but she nonetheless has to have a sight of it before she'll accept him. And she follows. What will she make of it? Perhaps because his collection is not as huge as some others, he picks up particular gems to show them to her individually, just in case she's missed some of their finer points. He also makes sure she realises how splendid he is personally by showing her the back of his neck. It seems to be a family habit, shared with those other species that have crests on their napes. And what about this for a real treasure, the molted skin of a cicada? And that may well have done the trick. they go off together into the bushes. In the forest a little farther north, another member of the family builds a rather more substantial avenue. Taller walls, more treasures. The male satin bowerbird is not quite as splendidly plumaged as the regent, as you'd expect, since his bower is bigger, but he is nonetheless a beauty. He regularly chooses leaves as decoration, and he does something more. He adds to the impressiveness of his bower by painting it. He chews up leaves and smears the pulp over the inside walls. One can only assume that the females of this species have a particular liking for interior decoration. When it comes to jewels, blue is undoubtedly his favourite. Objects like this berry. Presumably, since satin females clearly find their males' blue feathers attractive, this is an obvious way of adding to his appeal. But his tastes are wide. He likes a touch of green, curiosities like cicada skins, oddly shaped bones and skulls, and skeletonized leaves. Carrying a jewel around is a sure sign that he knows a female is near. She's landed just behind him. Here she is. Walking into the avenue is a strong hint that she's interested. What could be finer than this, madam? Away she goes. And so does he, leaving his collection unguarded. That's reckless, bearing in mind the family's tendency to thievery. Here comes his neighbour. Thieving is a widespread habit throughout the family. That's what happens when one's personal wealth becomes separate from one's body. But it's not the only way that a bowerbird can damage the appeal of a rival. The Australian desert has its own species, the western bowerbird, the one we saw at the beginning. He builds particularly high walls to his avenue. But this is not the owner of this impressive bower. This is a rival. Sheer vandalism. He works fast. The owner may be back any minute, and if he's caught, there could be trouble. Hours of work destroyed in a few minutes. If a female comes by before the owner of this bower can rebuild it, the vandal, with an undamaged, even if inferior bower nearby, will have the advantage. But not all interactions between male bowerbirds are vindictive. In fact, they can be quite the opposite. This in front of me is the work of the great bowerbird, which builds the biggest of all these avenue-type bowers. But it's not been produced by a single male. That is a juvenile, a young lad, as it were, and he's one of a group of about half a dozen young, immature males, lads, apprentices, who are learning their skills by working together on this bower. The techniques of wall construction seem to come just as easily to a bowerbird as nest building does to other birds. But home decoration is another thing. And these youngsters seem to have their own ideas. They've built a bower here in Townsville, in the municipal cemetery. Cemeteries offer special possibilities to an imaginative bowerbird. Marble chips. And lots of them. That, of course, could be a disadvantage. The thing that impresses a girl about diamonds is that they're rare and therefore expensive. You couldn't say that about marble chippings here. Still, they could work. You can vary them a bit. Snail shells, a few fragments of beer bottles, a hairband, but marble chips are the favourite. If you can't impress with rarity, then quantity could be the thing to go for. But shifting marble chippings in large numbers is thirsty work. The other side of town, the army barracks, and that has other possibilities for a bowerbird. Camouflage green is used by the modern army for all sorts of things, and the bird that owns this bower clearly thinks it's just the colour with which to dazzle a female, because it's assembled a whole collection of green objects here. They're foot powder packets, bits of flex, but mostly water bottle tops in green. But is he just choosing green because that is what happens to be around? Let's find out. He's back within seconds. I carelessly shifted that bottle. That's the first thing to put right. And then, what's that? That certainly won't do. You might think that there would be quite enough military paraphernalia here for everyone. On the other hand, stealing from one's neighbour not only improves your collection, but damages his. The owner is back, and there must be a female around, for he's starting his display. His only bright feathers are in that small pink crest on the back of his neck. That's her. This is the moment to add to his attractions by showing her his crest, and at the same time drawing her attention to one of his choicest possessions. And while he goes through his display rituals, so do his human neighbours. A few miles away, there's a school. There are lots of things here for an avant-garde bowerbird who wants to impress the opposite sex by showing what imaginative and innovative tastes he has. And indeed, there is a bower, a big, spectacular one, right in the school grounds. It's been built by another collective of young males practicing their art.
Is he carrying anything back to his head? Take them over to the free school.
The lads move in. There are all kinds of things to be tried out. So the Bowerbirds have come to town, and like anyone else coming into the big city for the first time, they're discovering all kinds of new visual excitements that they never knew in their old homes in the country. Who knows what these extraordinary bird artists will do with such new materials in years to come. No other male animal seeks to impress his mate not with his strength, his beauty or his physical skill, but with the wealth that he's accumulated through industry, thievery or artistic inspiration. Except, of course, one, us. But in both cases, it does seem to work.